Kia ora everyone, my name is Kathryn Murphy and I am a second year PhD student in the Classics Department at Trinity College Dublin, and I'm currently researching human-animal relations and Roman spectacles from the perspective of animal behaviour, with the aim to try and give animals a voice in the arena narrative. And today I'd like to briefly share with you my experience researching in a multidisciplinary field and the steps that I've taken to try and promote my work to a wider non-specialist audience through public engagement. The study of human-animal relations really requires one to engage with subjects in the natural sciences like zoology, ethology, biology, to try and avoid approaching the historical evidence from a strictly anthropocentric perspective. And this idea is something that has been adopted by a relatively new interdisciplinary field called HumanAnimal Studies, or anthrozoology, which acts as an intersection between the natural sciences and the social sciences like humanities. So this includes philosophy, archaeology, popular culture, technology, and medicine studies, just to name a few. And what you find is this cocktail of disciplines working together to better understand human-animal relations and promote methodologies that treat animals as active agents in mediating these interrelations rather than mere landscapes of a narrative. And because this field is so multidisciplinary, it lends itself to a varied platform in which to share and exchange specialist knowledge. The platform that I've been using throughout my postgraduate research has been zoos and wildlife sanctuaries. Back in 2014, I started volunteering at Auckland Zoo in Aotearoa, New Zealand, my homeland. And for most of my shifts, I would be posted outside different animal habitats, either by myself or with other volunteers. And our job was to educate the public on conservation and biodiversity, so tackling global issues like habitat destruction, poaching, the exotic pet trade, and the exchange of interspecies diseases like what we're facing right now. And in this environment, I was very fortunate to observe intimate interspecies interactions and also see how humans engage and react with different animals. And it really struck me that a wildlife sanctuary and zoo such as the one that I was working in offered a valuable space to rebuild and foster meaningful relations between humans and non-humans to conserve their future. I also realized that it was the perfect environment to be sharing stories about their past and how our relationship with certain species has evolved, or maybe not so much. So on my shifts, I started talking to people not only about the animals' conservation, but also about their history with different cultures and populations, to try and encourage people to reflect on their own relationship with animals and what that future might look like. And this is where my classics background comes into play. In 2017, I started researching elephant warfare, specifically the reception and tactical handling of elephants in the Roman and Seleucid armies. And the first question I investigated was, well, what can an elephant do? What physiological capabilities make it valuable in the context of a battlefield? And likewise, what characteristics render it problematic? To answer these questions, one really had to know the animal itself. So I used my time at the zoo to network with elephant keepers and build a foundational understanding of the animal's behavior, which featured so heavily in my research. The zoo then became a space for reciprocal learning. I was informing keepers about the animal's cultural history, and in return, they were training me on their natural history. And for the general public, the visitors, well, they were getting both histories. One of my favorite educational tools to use in the zoo are Biofacts, which are usually bone clones used by educators to talk about particular characteristics of an animal and then relate it back to their conservation. These tools have enabled me to be very creative with how I present my information about an animal's cultural history. So to give you an example, here at Dublin Zoo, which is where I work at now as a volunteer, we have an elephant foot, which I believe dates back to the 19th century when someone was actually using it as an umbrella stand. But because it's been preserved, you can get an idea of its morphology and see that the sole of the foot has an irregular profile, which enables the animal to traverse through difficult terrain. Back in 2019, in August, for International Elephant Day, I had my own little stall on human-animal relations in Antiquity, and I used this foot as a tool to discuss how elephants have been exploited by humans in difficult landscapes across the ages because of their unique toe and foot morphology and their adaptability. The classic example that resonates with a lot of ancient historians is Hannibal's mammoth trek over the Alps with his army of elephants. And that connection right there opened up the conversation to more current context on the role of elephants in Southeast Asian militaries, in logging camps, how they've been used in natural disaster emergencies to rescue people from isolated conditions that were perhaps not accessible by motor vehicles. And I found that when I was sharing this information, people were getting a more holistic take on elephant conservation. Children could actually visualize a continuum of exploitation and the zoological and cultural factors that were perhaps mediating and shaping these relations. But more importantly, what needed to be done to prevent exploitative interactions happening in the future. So that's just a brief example of how I've tried to make my research more accessible and intelligible to a non-specialized audience. The zoo caters to a wide demographic. You've got tourists, local families, residents, school groups, businesses, disability services. And what's great about these exhibitions is that you can actually measure your impact and quantify the value of your research by looking at how many people are engaging with your store, how long are they interacting with you, and what are their backgrounds? Are they keepers? Are they staff, volunteers, or just members of the public? As for my PhD project, I'm currently thinking of a way to reach out and target audiences that support entertainment sectors, so the likes of Tiger King. I strongly believe that traces of the Colosseum Games are still around us, and whilst we know better, we are no better. And that is the message that I really want to get across in my next project, whatever form that might look like. So, for everyone who is working in an interdisciplinary field or in an interdisciplinary thesis, I really encourage you to branch out to that other discipline that you're engaging with and investigate what public engagement opportunities might be available for you in that field, as well as in the academic sector. You'll probably hear from many career advisors that it's the transferable skills that you obtain that you can really utilize after a humanities doctorate. But I believe that shouldn't diminish the content of your research as well. There will always be someone who can benefit from your specialist knowledge. Thank you.